Good day, this is ImagineTime, and today we're going to cover progress billing. Progress billing is done for a variety of reasons. Typically to get an invoice out for services that have not yet been performed. An example of this would be an audit, where at the inception of the audit you send an invoice out, and then during the audit you send additional invoices out, staying ahead of the client, and then final billing the client at the end of the engagement. The other way you might do progress billing would be if you're on a monthly retainer engagement, and at the end of the year you have the possibility of billing additional services. You might want to change the fee, and you want to see at the end of the year the total time for the whole year against the total bills for the year, and then close them out on the last invoice. Now, not every practitioner does monthly bills this way. Many of them will clear the time each month, but others know that there's peaks and valleys, and they like to smooth it out, and rather than recognize the realization each month, when some months are more work for the same fee and some other months are less work for the same fee, they hold off and wait till the end of the year. So in those situations, a progress bill is used. At the end of the year, a final bill clears the time out. So we're going to use the audit example. I'm going to open the dashboard as of April. We're going to use Alabama Montrose as our client. Now I've gone ahead and entered some time for them already. It's $4,530 of time. Typically, the first thing we would do though is we would send out a progress invoice. So let me clear the dashboard of any pending invoices. You can tell that from this checkbox here. These are the temporary invoices, assuming that we were working on a session, and I'm going to start from scratch. I'm going to choose progress bill, $2,000, and print bill. Don't want to change the date yet. And I'm going to say progress bill on audit for 2016. Click preview and print. I'm showing the previous balance and the payment that was made, and then this progress invoice. I don't have to show the previous balance. That's an option. You can use letterhead or a bitmap graphic up here. You can move these fields around, change the font. You don't have to show the remittance advice. There's the invoice. I'm going to post it. When you post an invoice, it clears the time if there is any. In the case of a progress bill, it sets up an unearned allowance, kind of a accumulated depreciation account against your accounts receivable, so that you don't recognize income for services that have not yet been performed. In this case, I don't want to email it, but if I did, I could choose PDF, and it allows me to email this invoice through Outlook. I'm going to say no, and I'm going to post the invoice. It creates the transaction and the allowance. Let's take a peek at that. If I highlight Alabama Montrose, it says double click to view client invoice and payments. So here is that invoice for $2,000. This would be the terminology that would appear on a statement if you sent one out. I can also look at the client screen over here by double clicking on the client ID. The client screen will show you I have a bill balance outstanding and I have an allowance of $2,000. Now, I have recorded the time for the entire audit, so it shows the unbilled WIP. And actually, this presentation is the kind of presentation you would see at the end of the engagement, where the WIP is already in there, the work in progress. We've billed $2,000, and we have a final bill we have to get out for the remaining WIP. Let's go ahead and take a look at what I did with this WIP. I'll click Print Selected WIP. And let's choose the order that we'd like to see this in, code. And here is a subtotaled WIP report of all the time that was entered for this job, totaling $4,530. And here's our allowance. And in order to break even with our standard rates, we need to bill an additional $2,530 on the final bill. Now there's two ways of doing the final bill. You can send out another progress bill for $2,530, or you can do a final bill. The difference is that the final bill will close out the time. It'll clear the WIP out. It'll also clear out the allowances. Oftentimes, if you're not sure that it's the final bill, or you're kind of doing it on the fly and want to give yourself a little wiggle room, you'll send out another progress bill, and then you'll final bill. I'm going to show you both situations. In the final bill situation, first we have to release the time. So if I'm going to release it all, I can double click on the 2530, or I can go into release edit slips if I'm picking and choosing. And over here, I can pick the ones I want to release, or I can just click release like that. Then I choose Final Bill. It tells you that you can write up the final bill if you want to. In this case, let's go ahead and do that. First, I have to actually double click on the final bill and verify that I am allocating the progress bill, the previous progress billing to this project by entering an amount here. After I've done that, I can write it up, let's say to $3,000. Click Print Bill, and I will update the posting date now, and I'll say Final Bill on Audit. Okay, there it is, and it shows that there's been no payment since that last $2,000 invoice. Click Post, and now I have final billed it. You'll notice there's no time on the dashboard anymore, nor is there any allowance, because if there was an allowance you'd see a net number. Let's go ahead and look at the transaction in a different way. Before I double click from the dashboard, I can also go to Billing, Edit View Transactions, and type in the client name. There's our final bill, May 30th. If I click Billing History, it shows me all the time, and it also shows me the total of the write-up. Detail information about the bills that went out on this project. So that's a very nice way of doing it if you know that your final bill is your final bill. But let's assume the other case. So I'm going to undo the final invoice. I can click Form Tools, Delete, Delete Record. And in this case, it brings back all the time and turns the final bill into a progress bill. We're in this situation now where instead of final billing, we had done a progress bill. If we go back to the dashboard, you're going to see that we have a negative 470 in WIP because we final billed we've sent $5,000 in progress bills out against $4,530 in time. Now, the decision here is that the final bill or not? If it is the final bill, but you progress billed it instead of final billed it, you still have to clear out the work in progress. If you take a look at the WIP, you will see that we have $5,000 of WIP reserves against $4,530 of unbilled time. So we can't let that hang out there. That'll create a very sloppy set of books. I see that too often where time is accumulated and it's never cleared out. People let an allowance sit in there. So we've got to clean it up since we didn't final bill it. So the way to do that is by clicking Release Edit Slips. What we need to do now is tag to clear or write off. So I'm going to, on the left side, tag. Instead of releasing for billing, I'm going to tag for clearing. So I tag, then I click write off. It shows me my two progress bills and it assumes that the last one is the final bill. I don't have to use that one. I'm going to complete the write-off and it'll use the weighted average allocation for the write-up. If I uncheck this box, it will allow me to individually allocate the write-up and write down. But in this case, we're going to use the weighted average to keep it simple. And now I've done the same thing that I did a moment ago with the final bill. It took an extra step. I progress billed, and then I cleared the time against the progress bill in a separate step. The net result, if we go into the accounts receivable transaction ledger and look at the billing history, you can see that it converted that progress bill to a final bill, and my billing history is the same. Now there's one other way that we can do final bills and progress bills, a more powerful presentation, if you will. I'm going to undo the final bill and I'll undo the progress bill. I'm going to put ourselves in a situation where now we're ready to do the final bill, and we're going to use a different type of format. We're going to use a super bill. The super bill lets you do some unique things. I'm going to double click here. I've already set this up, but I'm going to final bill and show the client the final bill on audit, total engagement dollars. You may not want to express it that way. Down in the bottom you can see that using 5,000 against 4,530, I have my weighted average write-up down here. So I'm billing that, showing the client the total job, and then on this second row I'm applying a progress bill. I'm saying these are my previous progress bills. It does want you to drill down into that and make sure and allocate the progress bill by entering an amount here. Return to super bill, At this point I can click preview, and now I show final billing, less progress billing. Many customers and clients of ours like this presentation because it does give the client the benefit at the end of the engagement of seeing the total engagement dollars less the previous billed balance. In this situation, the client hasn't paid anything, but typically you would see that previous progress bill as having been paid. So if I click post and I jump back into my transaction ledger, instead of seeing final bill, I see super bill here. But if I go into my billing history, I get the same result. 4530, a write-up of 470, and these two invoices, which are the summary of all the invoicing on the project. So that's an example of the many different ways that you can progress bill. You can use both the progress bill or the super bill. When you do monthly engagements, monthly retainer bills, you can use the super bill for that and not clear the time, or you can use the recurring billing options. If you do use that, it takes you over to this screen, and on this screen you would simply say don't clear the time and make it a progress bill. So you can, on your recurring monthly jobs, you can not clear the time, and you can do that either using super bills. An example on a super bill would be your auto biller. Maybe you pick monthly engagements, and as we mentioned earlier, maybe on those monthly engagements you don't clear the time, you send a fixed fee amount out. Well, the elements of the super bill are basically going to be monthly accounting services with a don't clear option. Let me clean this example up because this is different here. So by double clicking, this is an example where we are clearing the time. If I wasn't going to clear the time until the end of the year, I would just enter $200 here, don't clear slips, and I would say monthly work. So that's an example of how progress bills and final bills are utilized. If I was using the monthly example, I would probably bill 12 of them, and then on the 13th invoice, if I have a final invoice for the year, that would be my final bill, and I'd clear out the time. I hope that's helpful, and thank you for watching this video.